Cristero War, the untold story of martyrs and rebellion. Mexico, that Catholic Church tried to erase from history. The Cristero War was one of the bloodiest conflicts in modern Mexican history, yet it remains largely forgotten. Nearly 250,000 people died in a war fueled by faith, poverty, and government oppression. Ordinary peasants, priests, and laypeople rose up against the Mexican state, shouting, "Viva Cristo Rey! Long live Christ the King!" This war was about more than politics. It was a battle for identity, religion, and survival. Stay with us as we uncover the causes, battles, and lasting legacy of this hidden chapter of history. To fully understand the war, we must first understand its causes, which are political, religious, and social-economic. Political ANAMP, legal background. The seeds of the Cristero War were planted in the 1917 Mexican Constitution, which introduced Articles 3, 27, and 130 to limit the Church's influence. These laws banned religious schools, restricted priests' public presence, and stripped the Church of property rights. While intended to create a modern secular state, they were perceived as a direct attack on centuries of faith. By 1926, the Calles Law enforced these rules even more aggressively, closing churches and punishing clergy. The government aimed to centralize power and weaken traditional elites, sparking anger among the faithful. For many Mexicans, these measures were intolerable. The closure of churches and persecution of priests turned religious practice into a risky act. Communities felt their way of life was under siege, with government forces dictating what could and could not be done in sacred spaces. This legal oppression was the spark that ignited a widespread uprising. Ordinary people, previously peaceful, prepared to defend their faith with arms in hand. Religious factors. Religion lay at the heart of the conflict, shaping both motivation and identity. Catholic worship was central to daily life, and restrictions on priests and public services were deeply offensive. Many felt their very souls were under attack, as they were forbidden to practice traditions freely. For the faithful, the war was not merely political, it was a sacred duty to resist. Their devotion turned into a powerful force that fueled rebellion. The rallying cry, "Viva Cristo Rey," became more than a slogan. It was a symbol of unity and courage. Every time it was shouted, it reinforced the idea that their struggle was holy. Families, peasants, and clergy embraced this call, seeing their actions as a defense of faith. The words embodied hope, courage, and defiance against a government perceived as tyrannical. Faith and resistance became inseparable in this struggle. Social ANAMP, economic factors, economic hardship, intensified the rebellion. Rural peasants, already struggling with poverty and land disputes, resented government interference. The Church often provided community support, so attacking it felt like stripping away their safety net. The intrusion of federal forces into villages heightened tensions and left locals feeling cornered. Peasants saw joining the Cristeros as a fight for survival as well as faith. Regional identity also fueled resistance. States like Jalisco, Michoacán, and Guanajuato had strong Catholic traditions that shaped community life. Government intrusion was perceived as an attack on both culture and religion. Protecting faith meant protecting families, traditions, and local autonomy. Economic, social, and spiritual concerns combined to create the perfect storm for rebellion. If you're learning something new about this forgotten war, like this video and subscribe to help us reach 100,000 subscribers and share more hidden history. Let us now consider the nature of the conflict, focusing on its main participants, significant events, and supporting parties. Participants, the Cristeros, were a mix of peasants, lay Catholics, and a few brave priests. Poorly armed but deeply committed, they took up arms to defend their faith. Women and children supported the cause through supplies and intelligence. Their strength came from devotion rather than military training. Together, they formed a grassroots force capable of challenging the government. The Mexican government responded with its national army and police. Their goal was to enforce the Cali's law and suppress rebellion. Armed, trained, and organized, government forces had superior weaponry. Yet their efforts often alienated civilians, driving more people to the Cristero cause. The conflict became a brutal cycle of violence and retribution. Key events and several battles defined the course of the war. The Battle of San Julian in 1927 was a Cristero victory that boosted morale. Despite being outnumbered, the rebels' knowledge of terrain and local support helped them triumph. Each battle, however, triggered harsher government reprisals, with entire villages punished. These events made it clear that victory came at a high cost. Guerrilla tactics were the Cristero's main weapon, striking quickly before disappearing into the countryside. The government launched counterinsurgency campaigns to isolate and destroy them. Meanwhile, international attention grew, especially from the United States. U.S. Ambassador Dwight Morrow eventually helped broker negotiations, showing the conflict had global significance. These events highlight both the resilience of the rebels and the government's determination to maintain control. External support for the Cristeros came from beyond Mexico. The Knights of Columbus, a US-based Catholic organization, offered financial aid and raised awareness. Their support helped sustain the movement during critical periods. International attention framed the conflict as a struggle for religious freedom, not just a local uprising. Global solidarity gave the rebels both legitimacy and hope. Foreign awareness pressured the Mexican government to consider negotiation. Reports of church closures and priest executions drew outrage abroad. While no foreign armies joined the fight, diplomatic attention played a key role. US diplomats, particularly Dwight Morrow, mediated peace talks that ultimately ended the conflict. International involvement helped shape the resolution and legacy of the war. The shocking human toll and casualties of the Cristero, the human cost of the Cristero War was enormous. Around 250,000 people died, including government forces, rebels, and civilians. The government lost nearly 57,000 soldiers, while Cristero casualties ranged from 30,000 to 50,000. Civilians bore the brunt of the violence, suffering massacres and displacements. Entire communities were uprooted, leaving deep scars for generations. Thousands fled to the United States, seeking refuge from the fighting. Priests and lay people executed for refusing to abandon their faith became martyrs. These martyrs were later canonized, ensuring their sacrifices would not be forgotten. Each life lost represented faith, courage, and the tragedy of civil conflict. The war left a legacy of pain and resilience that continues to resonate today. The resolution and aftermath. By 1929, both sides were exhausted, and negotiations became inevitable. The arreglos, or agreements, ended open conflict and allowed the church limited rights. Churches reopened, and some clergy returned to their communities. Cristeros were largely disbanded, and many felt betrayed as promises were not fully honored. The war concluded with compromise rather than clear victory. Tensions between church and state persisted for decades. Official Mexican history downplayed the conflict, framing it as a minor rebellion. In contrast, Catholics preserved stories of martyrdom and sacrifice. The war became a symbol of faith against oppression. Its legacy continues to shape discussions of religious freedom in Mexico. Historians' perspectives, the religious freedom view, many view the Cristero War primarily as a fight for religious freedom. Catholic writers describe the Cristeros as martyrs defending their faith. The Calais Law criminalized religious practice, creating widespread persecution. Stories of priests and laypeople willing to die for their beliefs dominate this perspective. Faith was the driving force behind the uprising. Canonizations of Cristero martyrs reinforce this view, turning their struggle into a spiritual legacy. It frames the conflict as a holy war rather than political rebellion. These narratives highlight courage, devotion, and sacrifice. The war becomes a lesson on the importance of protecting religious freedom. It also illustrates the human cost when faith and power collide. Social and economic view. The historians emphasize the social and economic drivers of the war. Rural poverty, land disputes, and government neglect fueled the rebellion. The church often provided stability and aid, making attacks on it feel like a personal affront. John Meyer highlighted how class, land, and faith issues intersected to ignite the uprising. The Cristeros fought both for survival and spiritual freedom. From this perspective, the war was as much about injustice and inequality as religion. Peasants sought to defend their communities against systemic neglect. Their rebellion reflected economic desperation combined with spiritual conviction. This lens deepens understanding of the war beyond simple religious explanations. The conflict became a struggle for both heart and livelihood. Regional resistance view, the rebellion was strongest in specific regions with deep Catholic traditions. Jalisco, Michoacán, and Guanajuato resisted central government intrusion fiercely. Locals viewed anti-clerical policies as an attack on both religion and identity. Protecting faith meant protecting family, culture, and autonomy. Geography and tradition shaped the strength and persistence of the movement. Resistance was also framed as defending local authority against centralization. Communities fought to maintain control over their affairs. Cultural pride and religious devotion intertwined to drive rebellion. Historians highlight how regionalism influenced the course and character of the war. It was a clash of local autonomy versus centralized power. State consolidation view, some historians see the war as part of post-revolution nation building. The government sought to consolidate authority and weaken rival powers, including the church. The Cristero War represented one of the last major barriers to a modern Mexican state. Suppressing rebellion was necessary from the state's perspective to enforce reforms. This interpretation frames the conflict as a step towards stability rather than purely religious resistance. After the war, central authority was stronger, but the cost was immense. The conflict allowed the government to assert control over education, politics, and society. While painful, it advanced Mexico's vision of a modern, secular nation. The Cristero War became a tragic yet essential episode in state consolidation. It illustrates the tension between modernization and tradition, showing how difficult it was to create a unified Mexican state after the revolution. The state's victory was not total, as Catholic identity remained strong, but it marked a turning point in defining the balance of power between church and government. In many ways, the war's resolution paved the way for modern secular governance in Mexico. It demonstrated that central authority could impose laws even in deeply religious regions. Yet, the struggle left lingering resentment and memories that persisted for decades. Memory ANAMP, legacy of the war, the memory of the Cristero War, remains divided to this day. Official Mexican history largely minimized the conflict, presenting it as a minor rebellion that challenged revolutionary progress. Meanwhile, Catholic communities preserved the stories of courage, sacrifice, and martyrdom. Canonizations of Cristero martyrs reinforced the narrative that the faithful had suffered heroically for their beliefs. For many, the war remains a symbol of religious perseverance and devotion. Today, the Cristero War is remembered in two contrasting ways. Politically, it is a footnote in the nation's revolutionary history. Religiously, it is a testament to faith under persecution. The conflict highlights the ongoing tension between secular authority and spiritual conviction. Its legacy continues to influence discussions on freedom, identity, and the role of religion in society. By studying this war, we gain a deeper understanding of Mexico's complex history and the enduring power of belief. If you found this story of faith, resistance, and sacrifice compelling, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Help us reach 100,000 subscribers so we can continue uncovering hidden chapters of history from around the world.